Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 4172. Today's date is 24 July 2026. It's been almost like a night at 9:23 p.m. All right. Today I will gonna talk something very differently. Okay, different means like talk like basically usually I kind of like a record artifact regarding about the kind of like only questions and things and that. But today I'm kind of like a talk about something which is actually happening, and I wanted to just give my opinion regarding about that. Okay. First of all, today's date is 24 July 2026. Okay. And let me kind of like tell you something. I'm belong from India, so I'm gonna tell you from. Okay, I'm belong from India. Okay, like basically you have to understand the context first. Okay. Last year, I'm not really sure, my information that I'm trying to tell you is kind of like a little bit fragile because it's not really precise information, but kind of like I'm gonna tell you whatever, like, okay, yeah, it's the information is kind of like a little bit. Okay, okay, let me explain first. Okay, yeah. Okay, so almost like a last year 2025, the Indian education system is conducted exam, NEET exam. Okay, yeah. What is exactly NEET exam? So NEET exam is a kind of like an entrance exam for the people who are wanted to be doctor or kind of like a went into the medical field. Okay, or I don't know, like I'm not really sure about what exactly NEET exam does, but somewhat something kind of like it's a kind of like an entrance exam for kind of like a simply people who wanted to become a doctor. Okay, now this is kind of like a very tough exam, and so many people are kind of like a simply enroll in that exam, and when they will pass, then they will kind of like a they will not going to become doctor. They will kind of like a simply like a eligible for uh, getting the admission into the medical college. Eligible. Okay, yeah. Just eligible to kind of like get the college. Okay, the college not even get it, like basically you are just eligible for kind of like you could apply for in medical college. Okay, so this is kind of like a somewhat something NEET exam. Okay, now basically the NEET exam is actually conducted by the Indian government, specifically Indian education system. Okay, now because of this exam is a kind of like a very big exam, and so many people are kind of like a enroll, and so many people are kind of like a something put into this NEET exam. Okay, uh, then what is actually happened that key last year in 2025 leak actually happened, paper got leak. Okay, first of all is that this is a written exam. Okay, like basically you have to pen paper write exam. Okay, so it's not kind of like a digital exam. Okay, it's a paper pen and things and that. No, it's a kind of like a written exam. I'm not really sure, but probably a kind of like a simply paper exam. Okay, it's not kind of like a digital exam. Okay, and paper got leak, and when the paper got leak, things get very serious. Okay, why does it kind of like make so serious? Because imagine you are kind of like a putting a lot of amount of effort for exam and things and that. Now you realize that keen within a month you have an exam, and like basically within a week you have an exam. Okay, and suddenly kind of like somebody um, like tomorrow you have exam. Okay, tomorrow you have exam, you are kind of like putting lot of amount of effort, things and that, and you kind of like a went to do your exam, kind of like a basically is this thing you kind of like a perform whatever the way that you should supposed to be, like basically you do your exam. Okay, you come back home, and when you come back home, the in the news there is a kind of like a say that key paper got leak. Okay, and you are kind of like a mind get fuck, like literally just like that na ki today you just kind of like a did the exam. Okay, and you are kind of like a believe in the government that key government will kind of like a specifically Indian education system will kind of like a somebody uh, select such a people who are kind of like a credible. But because of the people, because of the paper got leak, then basically is this thing, the people who kind of like assembly credible, like they are not get the medical seat. The people who are kind of like a do the cheating and kind of like a paper got leak, those people will kind of like get so much amount of score because they already knew what kind of like a question that they will get and things and that and that. This actually happened, like literally just like entire country was blown out, like every news media and things and that kind of like a talk about this thing, that ki why not we are kind of like simply do the basic exam. Okay, why cannot we able to be kind of like a conduct the kind of like a basic exam and things and that is kind of like a got leak and things and that. Now this is actually happened, and last year, um, and because then after that government will kind of like a try to make sure this will not gonna happen. So what will gonna happen, they kind of like a cancel the exam. Okay, like basically you just kind of like a you kind of like a put the paper right now, you are kind of like a free, but somehow you kind of like get the news that paper got leaked and there is a re-exam actually happened, then your mind get fucked na dude. Like basically you are kind of like doing re-exam, like whatever the effort that you did, it just doesn't really make sense at all. Another thing is that na, you are not really sure that ki will I able to be trust the government or not, because the government is kind of like a very much fragile and things and that. But re-exam actually happened, things that happened. Okay, now problem actually solved, right? Like problem actually solved. But this is kind of like a very big issue. So kind of like that na ki the freedom fighter, it's not freedom fighter by the way, the Phunsukh Wangdu is a kind of like a something, the it's not freedom fighter, but he kind of like did a lot of kind of like a good stuff to the um, schools and teachers and students and things and that. And he realized that ki our Indian education system is kind of like a really corrupted and things and that. He started kind of like simply doing a kind of like a Amran Upashan. What is that word? It says that ki like the particular person will not gonna eat. Okay, yeah. And he will kind of like simply why he will not gonna eat, because he has a kind of like a things that he kind of like showing the aggression towards the government, that ki our government is kind of like really not so good and things and that. I have kind of like some sort of kind of like some request from the government. If those requests are not followed, then I will kind of like die. Okay. Okay, what will gonna happen if that particular person die? Well, basically is this thing, this Amran Upashan is not kind of like a things that he is kind of like doing at his home and kind of like somebody, no. Like basically is this thing, he is a kind of like somebody put the stage and things and kind of like thousands of people on their camp and kind of like somebody they are doing this kind of like a things, media things and that, a lot of attention it got and things and that. But government will kind of like manage their request, and they say that ki, yeah fine, we will kind of like simply accept your request and things and that. Okay, so they kind of like said something, and then Phunsukh Wangdu is a kind of like a cancel they kind of like did their kind of like opposition for at most like a week or maybe I'm not really sure, but then after that they stop. Okay, now this actually happened last year, means 2025. Okay, I'm not really sure about the exact date or maybe exact year, maybe 2024 or maybe 2025, but possibly it has actually happened in 2025. Now the same thing actually happened this year too. Okay, yeah. Now this year 2026, kind of like a something, when the NEET have an exam, like every year they have kind of like exam, and same this year paper got leaked too. Literally this paper got leaked too. And when this actually happened again, then things might get like a like basically last year when this actually happened, usually people don't really like, people kind of like feel that ki, okay fine, okay yeah, it's a kind of like basically it's a kind of like exam got leaked and things, it is a kind of like a big issue, but it's not like that. But when this year, means 2026, same thing actually happened, then because of that ki entire media and entire kind of like somebody just thinks that ki how does paper got leaked, the last year paper got leaked, this year also paper got leaked. Okay, yeah. And when this actually happened, student went crazy, like literally went crazy and things, some people kind of like did suicide and things and that. Lot of stuff actually happened, the kind of like a CBI inquiry and things and that, so many things actually happened. Now because of the paper got leaked, so basically the paper got cancelled and they kind of like simply rearrange the next month exam with kind of like a military level of kind of like a security. Okay, the paper got kind of like a transported by the Air Force. Okay, yeah, so that people will go not gonna leak and things and that and that. And the re-exam actually happened, and kind of like assembly the re-exam actually happened. Now because now last year Funsuk Wangdu kind of like did the kind of like assembly Amran Uposhan and things and that. But this year same thing actually happened. So Funsuk Wangdu started doing this Amran Uposhan because he says that "Ki this is a had enough. We need a kind of like a something the strong like a basically the culprit of the particular person is the education minister should supposed to be resigned." Okay, so the Funsuk Wangdu kind of like started doing a kind of like a something Amran Uposhan, and with almost like a thousands of kind of like a people are kind of like a connect with them and things like that. Now this time, last year was thousands of people, but this year almost like a millions of people are kind of like a gather. Why? Because same thing actually happened na. Paper got leaked last year, paper got leaked this year too. So like this is went crazy. Okay, yeah. So many people have kind of like so much amount of aggression regarding about the government and things and that they kind of like came together and kind of like everyone kind of like say this thing that ki we need a kind of like a resignation of Education Minister of India. Okay, everyone kind of like say this thing. Now because of this actually a kind of like a student protest, usually most of the students are Gen Z, so they kind of like went into the capital city Delhi and they are kind of like doing the protest over there. Okay, and I am and basically is this thing when this actually happened, things got really chaos and things and that. Now I have to be kind of like give my opinion. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing, is it right like doing the protest and things and that because basically is this thing now when peaceful protests actually happen fine controlled, okay, but when there is a kind of like a unpeaceful or uncontrolled chaos or uncontrolled kind of like a simply the protest actually happen, then this is cannot able to be controlled. Like why? Imagine like basically millions of people are kind of like simply coming at you. Okay, millions of people, they don't really have any kind of like a weapon, but they just have kind of like a whatever they kind of like a stuff like a basically stone or whatever it is and thick kind of like that. Even if you have a kind of like a military or kind of like a strong kind of like a somebody super force or even Superman, they can't even stop the millions of people. Because let me tell you one thing, it's a millions of people, and those people are kind of like a somebody that they don't really have any weapons and things like that. So you cannot able to be kind of like a hit them. Why? Because if you hit them, then there is a kind of like a laws that ki without even any kind of like a weapon, if you hit them, then this might be kind of like a criminal offense and things and that. So this is kind of like a really chaos actually happened right now in Delhi capital city. The Gen Z people and the protester are kind of like doing a lot of protest regarding about things and that. By the way, like it's not really that people got killed, but people got injured. Okay, yeah, because as also the kind of like a police, they also have a kind of like a job to control the mob and things and that they use kind of like a multiple forces like a tear gas, water cannon and things and that to control the mob. Okay, but still too much. Okay, like there are almost like a millions of people are kind of like in there Jantar Mantar Stadium, almost like a million, not millions, but probably like a like maybe 7 to 8 lakh rupee, 8 lakh people might be there. Okay, yeah. So there are so much amount of people. Okay, and basically every day they are kind of like somebody coming and things like that. Now, I have to be asked this question to myself that ki, if the education minister resign, then protest will stop. Yes. If education minister resign, then this problem will stop. Like a paper got leaked, this problem will stop. No. Now, why does kind of like somebody education minister are blamed for that? Well, basically, this is kind of like somebody issue actually happened with the education. The people who are kind of like somebody higher authority is the education minister. So that's why people are kind of like a things. So paper got leak is because of the education minister of India? No, definitely not. Then why does people are kind of like a protesting regarding about resignation of kind of like education minister? Like basically is this thing now, let's ask the simple question. Okay, like basically is this thing, why do I like if I'm the education minister of India, obviously I would not gonna involve in any kind of like a paper leak, nothing really at all. It just I don't like literally nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. But still, because of in my kind of like a position or in my kind of like a whatever I'm kind of like a doing, stuff went wrong. Okay, like a maybe kind of like a somebody the education minister of time is a kind of like a very wrong, because in that particular period of time things got happened, paper got leaked and things and that. Okay, so resignation of education minister of India, is it right thing or wrong thing? Is it kind of like actually solve the problem or not, or kind of like a things? Well, I realized something. Let's talk about a couple of things. Okay, like I'm gonna talk about first of all I'm gonna talk about the protest. Okay, peaceful protest, I'm completely okay with that thing. Okay, peaceful protest is really good, really great, execute, because sometime protest is kind of like a meant to be happen for kind of like a keeping the eye open and kind of like a let the government knows that ki kind of like a citizen, they also have a rights and things, and the protests are really essential. It's a part of kind of like a it's a freedom of kind of like a citizen. They have kind of like a rights to kind of like a changes and things, and if they kind of like don't really like the stuff and things, which is really good. Protests are meant to be right. It kind of like a really showing the good for good kind of like a quality of kind of like a democracy and things like that. Protest is supposed to be really good, but uncontrolled protest, like that is wrong. Like basically in the protest, usually every people who are in that particular protest, they do have a kind of like a same thing? No. Like they do want kind of like a same thing? No. They just kind of like a went there to just do the time pass, do the kind of like a stupid shit and what do you mean? Okay, so let me tell you something. I am a human, okay, and we are kind of like a social animal. Even if I am not a kind of like a particular person associated with the need, or even if I am completely like I don't know nothing really about NEET and what is that paper got leaked, nothing really at all. But still, I will gonna participate in that protest. Why? Because it's a kind of like a simply the celebration thing. What do you mean? When did kind of like a protest become celebration? Actually, is this thing na ki okay. Let me like we have kind of like I'm kind of like a talk about a little bit of philosophy right now. I will gonna talk about the kind of like assembly regarding about the like I'm gonna talk about the philosophy first. Okay, let's just understand couple of things. Okay, so basically is this thing in the protest, one people by like one and another people are kind of like a gut connected. Every people are kind of like a wanted to be part of the protest and things like that. Why? Because when they are in the protest and when they are kind of like a say this thing like a one day matram kind of like a so saying something that ki like we are fighting for a country and things and that we should supposed to be kind of like do this thing like a corrupted minister should supposed to be resign and that, so we will gonna do the protest and things and that. Okay, now what will gonna happen if the peaceful protest actually happen? These like a basically the people who are kind of like doing stupid shit, they will not gonna happen. Peaceful protests actually happen with a kind of like a particular period of time, with a particular period of place, with a permission, with lot of stuff. Okay, also when the protests actually happen, government is also kind of like fund them kind of like regarding about the food, water and things like that. But uncontrolled kind of like something the uncontrolled, what is that Lisa? Uncontrolled protests actually happen, then economy collapse. Not economy, somewhat something economic collapse. Okay, how and why? Okay, so first of all is that when such an uncontrolled protest actually happened, that uncontrolled protest not only happened in capital city, it actually happened all around the world. So it actually happened all around the country. Basically, right now the protests actually happen in main capital city, then Bombay, then kind of like a couple of kind of like assembly education department or things where kind of like assembly protests actually happening. Okay, one thing. Another thing, because of it's a kind of like uncontrolled protest, people are kind of like doing chaos. Okay, and when the chaos happened, things went wrong. Okay, how? So basically, when the protests or actually happened, or maybe specifically in Delhi, the protest actually happening, the entire Delhi is a shutdown, or maybe part of the kind of like a Delhi is somewhat simply shut down. Traffic got kind of like a simply diverted, or things like that, because the protesters are kind of like doing this thing. Also, is this thing, you are not really sure what will gonna protester do. They will kind of like do anything. They might gonna block not only the road, but they also block the train, and you cannot stop them because they don't have any kind of like a weapon, things and that and that. Okay, you can do the kind of like simply lathi charge, but still just you can't do that more. You might gonna do arrest, but you also need a kind of like a valid kind of like a reason that why did you arrest and things and that and that. And obviously you cannot arrest millions of people because there are millions of people. Even if the millions like thousands of people, you cannot arrest thousands of people because it's not, the scale is kind of like too much. How much the people might gonna arrest? Maybe kind of like a 10, 20, 50, that's it. More than 100 they cannot able to be arrested. So basically the police people are also kind of like bitterly concerned that how do we supposed to control this mob. Okay, because when uncontrolled protests start, it's very difficult to stop. Okay, why? Because things might get so much worse. First of all, the traffic got blocked. Maybe kind of like a railway station also kind of like they also stopped their services. The stores and malls also got stopped too. Okay, entire economy over there, like basically like the people who are kind of like doing a job and things and that, they might not gonna do the job, or if they wanted to arrive the office and things and that, so basically they cannot arrive. They kind of like a cab station will kind of like simply stop. The metro services will gonna stop. Why these kind of like services are stop? Because protester will kind of like do anything. Okay, like basically protester will kind of like went to the metro station and they will kind of like damage the property. They could able to do this thing, and who will responsible for that? Not them. Okay, government are responsible for them. So it is kind of like a very difficult for government to kind of like stop the protest. Really difficult. Okay, so what I'm saying is that ki when the protest actually happened, this is not really good. Like it's a kind of like a somebody it kind of like a somebody hurting entire, not entire, but hurting economy of that particular cluster where it actually happened and things and that. Okay, this is the one thing. Another thing, as I mentioned, because it's an uncontrolled protest, people can do so many things, and that is not right. What is at least so many things? Okay, first of all is that this is a kind of like issue regarding about student education minister, but right now this protest is became political. Now every political kind of like because of India is a democracy country, we have kind of like a lot of kind of like a political party, and each political party are kind of like assembly concerning their issue with the kind of like assembly with same, like basically what exactly happened now ki when the people are got heated, then it's kind of like basically this thing, like when the iron got heat, this is kind of like a higher chances that you kind of like hit the iron so that you could kind of like mold. Okay, because when the iron gets solid or cold, or maybe kind of like in the normal temperature, you cannot do anything at all. So basically this is what it is, like basically is this thing, the people got heated. Okay, everyone kind of like want ask for answer for kind of like a ruling government and things and that. So every political party are kind of like assembly want their own kind of like a concern, or want their own kind of like assembly what is at least this thing, own something point, no not point, own like a own kind of like a politics interest, own interest, like a they also have kind of like interest regarding about that, so they will also do this thing. Okay, and when this actually happened, the political party will kind of like take into the another turn, like literally another turn, because they just need a kind of like a momentum of the people are who are kind of like angry regarding about ruling country, ruling government, and the other political party are kind of like somebody, the like opposite party are kind of like things, they are kind of like supporting the protester and things and that, and so many things will gonna happen. So many things will gonna happen. This is uncontrolled protest, it is very difficult to stop. And who will kind of like a blame, like basically is this thing, even if the protester die, government got blame. Okay, yeah, anything actually happened, like basically the police person will also kind of like get hurt by the protester, it is also responsible for the ruling government too. So basically from both the side, ruling government is kind of like somebody just like a crumbled and things and that. Okay, yeah. And another thing is that na, this is not right. I believe that the problem is not a kind of like a one particular person. The problem is the system. Our education system is so corrupted that a one person or resignation of one person cannot able to solve the problem. But I think that na ki even if I'm kind of like a say this thing, sometime protest should supposed to be happen. Even if the peaceful happen, that is okay. Unpeaceful or maybe uncontrolled protest happen, this is also okay too. Why? Because of that, sometime growth is also come from the chaos. Like example, when this actually happened, now basically is this thing, if the kind of like somebody, the education minister will kind of like resign or not. Even if he resign, okay, yeah, the next particular person will kind of like choose. That particular person never will gonna think of regarding about the politics or corruption, nothing really at all, and he will try to make sure that the paper will not gonna leak anything at all. Okay, that particular person will try to make sure this is not gonna happen. Okay, so this is kind of like a thing is that na ki because of the kind of like a big impact, the kind of like a system will kind of like a fix it itself, because people who are kind of like doing this thing and that. Okay, now let's talk about the kind of like a system in Indian education system. Why does Indian education system is kind of like a so fuck, like why is kind of like a so corrupted? What is that the reason? Well, our Indian education system is really fragile, really corrupted, really outdated. Like it does not kind of like a teaching, like basically this thing na, our Indian education system is like a really fuck, and like it's not a kind of like a responsible for one person. The system is a kind of like a problem. Like basically is this thing, why do we have kind of like a somebody the education, like what exactly is this thing? The education are meant to be kind of like find the talent or to kind of like a better things and that. But our education system is not actually focused on finding a talent. They're actually focusing on marks, exam percentage and things and that. So most of the kind of like a people actually focus on exam, cracking the exam. They are not kind of like a focus on gaining the excellence or kind of like understanding the value and things and that. Most of the people who kind of like preparing for examination, they kind of like prepared for exam, just for exam. After they got the exam, they never really touched the book, nothing really at all. I experienced this thing. One of my friend who's a really good, really like he's a really smartest person. Okay, yeah, he's preparing for exam. He got the job, and then after that, he never really touched the book. Like literally, just like that. Now he just say that, why do I supposed to be kind of like read the book? I got a job. Like what exactly is this thing? Then what is the meaning of education? Nothing really at all. Like in here in India, education means just a job. That's it. People are kind of like a crippled from inside. Like literally their thoughts are kind of like somebody just 10-year-old person who is kind of like a thinking. That's the kind of like a things. People just kind of like education just for marks, just for things and that. The system is kind of like a corrupted from the inside, from the structure, from the kind of like from its core. And because of it kind of like somebody corrupted from its core, even if you how much kind of like a particular person that you change or how many people will you kind of like resign, you cannot. You have to change the system, upgrade the system. I have a kind of like a plan, but I'm not gonna tell you right now, or maybe I already mentioned this thing in kind of like a previous artifact episode. Okay, yeah, but I have to be asked another question to myself. I also wanted to be an education minister of India in the future. Now, if I became that particular person and something went wrong, do I resign? Do I kind of like take a responsibility of that? What do I supposed to do? Okay, yeah, if such thing will gonna happen with me in the future. Well, basically is this thing now, I believe solving the problem before it even existed. I have a kind of like a exactly plan regarding of how should we supposed to do this thing and that and that and that. Okay, yeah. uh, I have kind of like a Gurukul plan. I have kind of like a somebody like a basically I'm prepared for possible point of perspective. I I instead of kind of like a fixing the people, I kind of like a fix the system, because if I fix the system, people will automatically fix. Like basically, nothing is kind of like a wrong. Like basically, this thing, the Education Minister of India, the Dharmendra Pradhan, does he kind of like a wrong person? No, he is not a wrong person. Okay, yeah. Then why does people are kind of like somebody why does people are kind of like asking for his kind of like resignation and things and that, because he is a kind of like a somebody the authoritarian person, he is a leader of all, and people are kind of like sorry, because the particular person is leader, people are kind of like easily point out that because of this actually happened because of this particular person, but this particular person is never really responsible for nothing really at all. Okay, the question is that when something actually happened with me, what do I supposed to do? Okay, I first of all is that I am making sure that such a kind of like a mistake will not gonna happen, or I usually solve the mistake before it even existed. Okay, this is the one thing. Another thing, I will not gonna hold such a responsibility until and unless I am kind of like a very sure regarding about I will kind of like assembly fix, or I will not gonna do this thing, because a kind of like a chairman of particular company is kind of like a things, because you are the kind of controlling every particular person. But if you are say I am the minister of particular things or particular department, then or kind of like a things like a government representative, something like that, then that is kind of like a big responsibility. I will only and only take such a responsibility when I am confident enough to that I could able to do this thing, and also I need have kind of like a some solid purpose regarding about why am I doing this thing, a reason of why is really essential. Okay, now another thing, even after all those kind of like a things, even after I put everything that this will not gonna happen, and I kind of like a dude, I kind of like a do a lot of things. Okay, but even after something actually happened and people are kind of like asking me for my resignation, I will kind of like, first of all is that if something wrong will gonna happen, I will take the responsibility that this actually happened because of me. Okay, yeah. Even if the kind of like a people ask me for resignation, I will do the resignation, because power is a never really kind of like a bin that I wanted to. If I became that Education Minister of India, my only purpose to add value in the people life. Okay, yeah, that position is kind of like a giving me that amount of power, and when that, if I'm not credible enough to utilize that power for right purposes, I will definitely resign. I'll definitely kind of like a take the responsibility of things, and I will try to solve that things like by myself or things and that. At least instead of that, I would kind of like say sorry, because sometimes chaos you cannot kind of like control. Sometimes that chaos actually happen, and kind of like a people will gonna die and things and that. And the only one thing that I could able to be say is that sorry. That's it. By the way, okay, there are so many people are kind of like went to the protest, and they are kind of like doing lot of crazy things, like they are kind of like doing reels and things. I don't know, the way that they are kind of like protesting is not the way that you expected. The particular person who kind of like wear the Spider-Man costume and kind of like doing a protest, like what the fuck is this thing? Okay, there is a one particular person, let's just say a kind of like a police who kind of like a firing a water cannon for protesters are kind of like a student. Okay, they are enjoy, they are kind of like some rain dancing, like you just say, oh pani shuru ho gaya, let's just dance and things, and just, what the fuck is this thing? Okay. So yeah, why not they throw the tear gas? Well, basically is this thing that regarding about whatever the weapon that you use against the protest, it is kind of like a very crucial that you will not kind of like a like basically is this as I mentioned, the protester, the biggest strength of protester are they are in too much number, and they don't really have any kind of like weapons. Okay, yeah. Like basically is this thing that let me tell you one thing. Okay, you don't really have any kind of like a weapon. Okay, so you are kind of like a somebody, you don't really have any kind of like a things. Okay, yeah. So even if the kind of like a police in front of you, he cannot do anything at all. He might, like, literally just like that, only authority that police has is that he kind of like do the lathi charge. Lathi charge means like he has a kind of like a stick, and he kind of like somebody attacked by the stick. Also, he only able to be attacked by stick on the bottom body, like a basically bottom half, not top half. Okay, if that particular police person kind of like hit you and hit you in upper body, then that is completely wrong. He has to be hit lower body, like legs and things and that and that. He cannot able to be hit you and the upper body. He, even if that particular person hit, even if that kind of like police person kind of like hit upper body, then kind of like he might gonna lose the job and things and that and that, because so many things actually happened. So many things actually happened. Okay, regarding about the tear gas, okay, you can use the tear gas, but very precisely. Okay, to make sure that ki kind of like a control the mob, or kind of like a divert the mob, or kind of like a make sure that mob will not kind of like a too much. Okay, that's why they use the tear gas, so that kind of like a not too much. Like if there is a kind of like a too much tear gas, then breathing problem will gonna happen. People might gonna kind of like get unconscious and things and that. So, and even if something worse happened, like if those protesters will gonna die, protester will went even more crazy, dude, even more crazy. Like basically this thing, the protester fuel is kind of like increase by resistance more. So if you add more resistance, then kind of like a protester will kind of like do the protest even more. It's a kind of like a thing that na, ki if you are kind of like a only the fire is actually happening, and you are kind of like throwing the water, and water, because of water, it kind of like a flame is kind of like a much more higher. Like this is what actually happened. So protest, you cannot control the protest. You have to be kind of like a less resistance with kind of like a somebody, just control whatever the weapon that you have. You cannot use tear gas. You have to control. You have to use tear gas with very controlled way. Whatever the kind of like lathi charge that you are gonna do, is that you have to make sure that lathi charge should supposed to happen with the controlled way and things and that. There is a lot of things. Okay, yeah. If someone got hurt, or someone got kind of like died in the protest got kind of like even more brutal. And when something brutal will gonna happen, might be civil war will gonna happen. The government might gonna get toppled. In Nepal, like last year, Nepal actually happened. The government got toppled because of the kind of like a protest. Yeah, literally, the prime minister are kind of like running away from the country because of the kind of like things that the kind of like the protest got crazy and things and that. So this lot of shit will gonna happen. One of my friend kind of like mentioned that why not you kind of like assembly support regarding about the protest and things and that and that. Well, protest, I am not really like I don't like protest. Like literally just like that na ki, like sometimes I kind of like feel like protests are kind of like a really essential. It's a part of the democracy and things and that it's a kind of like human rights, which is really good. But I don't really believe that. I believe in fixing system instead of kind of like fixing people, because people are kind of like following the system. Okay, yeah. Okay, so basically it's this thing, and basically people are not kind of like wrong. Like it's not really that kind of like people are kind of like doing the corruption by themselves. If you fix the system, corruption will not gonna happen. Everything will gonna happen so smoothly. I believe in fixing system instead of fixing people, because you can't fix the people. Every person have kind of a different opinion and things and that. So yeah, this is just my kind of like an opinion regarding about this thing. But still, is that key? Like I'm gonna ask question again. Do you want to go to the Delhi and kind of like join the protest? Hell no, definitely not. Do you want to convince other that they shouldn't supposed to be go to the protest? No, I don't want to convince anybody at all. Every person kind of like a thing from them point of perspective, whatever the kind of like basically whatever that particular person think, they can do. I am not will gonna convince anybody in things and that. But I do understand, because of the protest, lot of damage will gonna happen. Lot of damage. It's a kind of like somebody economical kind of like somebody someone kind of like a stab in economy. It's kind of like that. Economy might not gonna collapse, but it's a kind of like a little bit hurt. Okay, so that is, yeah. Like basically, usually is this thing na, in India specifically, patriotism, it's very difficult to name. Okay, patronism. I'm not really sure. Wait, well, let me kind of like do the Google. What is actually patronism? Patriotism. Petro Patriotism. The love, devotion for deep sense of pride for country. Patriotism. Yeah, patriotism. Wait.
Patriotism.
Patriotism. Okay, patriotism. Okay, sorry about the pronunciation of the word. Is it recording? Wait. Okay, it's recording. Okay, yeah. So patriotism. So let's understand the image or imagination of patriotism. Okay, yeah. Let's just say I am a patriotism or I am very patriotic. Okay, yeah. Let's just say I am very patriotic about my country and things like that and that. So if I'm gonna say I am very patriotic about my country, what kind of like image that you kind of like get inside your head? I'm gonna kind of like give you another example so that you might gonna understand even more better. Let's just say a particular person kind of like holding a kind of like a flag, and he's a kind of like somebody in the protest, and he's a kind of like somebody just yelling at something and that and that. This is the picture number one. Picture number two, the particular person who is a kind of like somebody just kind of like somebody doing his work on the desk. Okay, yeah, in the computer he's kind of like doing his desk and things like that. So basically, and also another image is that the particular person who is kind of like a fight in the border and things and that and that. So let me tell you one thing, who is a kind of like somebody patriotic. Okay, yeah, most of people might gonna say the person who is kind of like in the border fight for the enemy and things like that. That is a kind of like somebody patriot, like he is a kind of like very patriotic. Another cases would be that particular person who kind of like a fight in the protest and things and that is a kind of like a somebody patriotic person. But none of the people will kind of like a think that a particular person kind of like a doing a job, he's a kind of like a showing as a kind of like a patriotism. What is really patriotism? Patriotism means like that adding a value to the country. Okay, and how much that value is supposed to be added by doing a work and things like that. Because when you do work, when you earn money, you spend money on the country will kind of like earn revenue from the tax and things and that. Basically is this thing, your growth is a kind of like somebody considered as a kind of like a patriotism and things and that. But instead of that, you are kind of like a fighting into the protest, or kind of like somebody have a kind of like somebody just in the border, you are kind of like thinking that oh, soldier is kind of like a little patriotism and things and that is also not right. Okay, like basically is this thing na ki what I realized that na ki in India, specifically in India, patriotism have kind of like a very wrong definition in the people mind. People might gonna think that ki okay, I am kind of like with the army or with the kind of like work with the kind of like a defense or things and that I am patriotism, but that is not, definitely not. Okay, the people who are kind of like somebody just struggling in the like kind of like somebody doing a fighting in the protest, and they are kind of like yelling at you, oh yeah, in the protest and things, I am kind of like a patriotic. That is also wrong, definitely wrong. The patriotism is actually came from the effort that you are putting every single day for yourself. Just make your life a little bit better. Just earn money, spend the money for yourself and things like that. That is called patriotism. It kind of add a value. If you wanted to do the patriotism, add something that already add a value. Like basically this thing that na ki build something that in the rest of the world no one kind of like build it, or kind of like do something that kind of like somebody shine your country, like basically in the sports or in the kind of like some field of science or in the field of kind of like things or whatever it is. That is called patriotism, somewhat something like that. You are kind of like somebody represent the world in kind of like some global stage. That is called patriotism, not a kind of like a fighting in the protest and things like that. But because of no one is kind of like became that kind of like a particular person that kind of like somebody represent in the global stage, and most of people are kind of like have opportunity to kind of like being part of the being part of protest, so they might think that I am very patriotic, and that is completely wrong definition. And for this particular purpose, the media and kind of like a movies are kind of like a fuel that particular emotion more and more, and they are kind of like doing their business and things and that and that. I sound really wrong at the moment, but if you are kind of like looking from bigger picture point of perspective, then you realize that yeah, I'm gonna say this thing like what is actually that people will kind of like somebody the lose the money, or kind of like somebody they are putting a lot of effort in the exam and things and that, and kind of like Indian government are kind of like not even kind of like try to do conducting proper exam and things like that. Like yeah, that is completely true, that is completely right, but for that particular purpose we have a kind of like a judicial system. You can kind of like go to the court, file against the kind of like somebody is this thing, as a kind of like we are living in kind of like a democratic country. We are kind of like file the report not only to the kind of like education minister, we also kind of like file the report against the kind of like a prime minister. Literally, if you have proper evidence and things and that and that and that, you could do that thing. But obviously that fight is kind of like very long, because you cannot kind of like somebody fight with a kind of like a prime minister, because but still you could, if you have kind of like a proper evidence in everything, then you could do that thing. Okay, but still most of people are kind of like somebody not choose a kind of like a structure way. People are kind of like choose a kind of like a chaos way and things and that and that. Yeah, people are kind of like put a lot of kind of like a sentimental value regarding about the protest, and they are kind of like putting things and that. Even if the people who don't really care about the NEET and things, I seen there are so many people right now, they are so much care about the kind of like things and protests and things and whatnot. Whatever, it's just my opinion. Okay, I might be wrong, I might be right, I'm not really sure. I'm just kind of giving my opinion. It's not meant to be kind of like hurt somebody, but just yeah. This is it. Thank you.